Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz's town hall this evening. As she takes your questions tonight, she's fortunate to be joined by Nancy Ann DeParle, a former top Obama White House official who is well versed on healthcare issues. One quick reminder, type in your questions about healthcare, affordability, and any other issues on the platform that you are currently joining us from, and we'll try to take as many of those questions as we can. With that, will you kick things off for us, Congresswoman?
Sure, Dave. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for joining my town hall. I hope the new year has been kind to you and your families so far. Unfortunately, for many of us, it's looking a lot like 2025. It's more chaos and cruelty from the White House, and Republicans still refuse to confront skyrocketing costs or rein in violent, chaotic ICE operations. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight with your questions. And to do it, I'm so fortunate to be joined by my special guest, Nancy Ann DeParle. Nancy Ann is going to help me tackle questions on healthcare and costs, and I'll let you hear from her in a second and give her a more proper introduction. So first, I want to just run through some quick updates. We just emerged from yet another government shutdown. Funding for about 80% of the federal government ran out on Saturday. But the House voted to reopen the government earlier today. Now, while I supported 5 of the 6 funding bills in the package, I voted no because I could not support resuming funding for the Department of Homeland Security without serious reforms and guardrails in place. In the final package that will go to the president's desk, though, I am really thrilled to tell you that I landed some really big wins for our community, and I'll share just a few of those. I helped secure $105 million for programs to stop internet crimes against children, including $500,000 to track down predators that will come right to our Broward County Sheriff's Office, who does a fantastic job going after internet child sexual predators. I secured $5 million for cancer, Alzheimer's, and other disease research at FIU, FAU, and Nova Southeastern universities. I secured millions more for Davie, Miramar, Pembroke Pines, and Fort Lauderdale to expand local roads, repair water systems, and train our first responders. Now, there are many more national and local wins, but in all of these spending bills, there's still one serious problem for all Democrats, and that is the Homeland Security budget, and quite frankly, many Republicans too. As many of you know, that budget included funding for ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. But please know this, be it the killings in Minneapolis or the daily acts of cruelty and lawlessness that ICE inflicts on communities, I'm fighting alongside my Democratic colleagues to end these abuses. And I've been leading the fight for accountability, oversight, and reform. Most Republicans just want to keep giving ICE a blank check. And by Republicans, I mean Republican members of Congress. And I cannot and will not do that. Masks need to come off, body cameras must be turned on, and judicial warrants should be required. No more ICE agents breaking into the homes of American citizens or lawful permanent residents or ripping people out of cars. No more rounding up and detaining American citizens just because they have brown skin. Our local law enforcement follows these basic rules, and they do a great job keeping us safe. ICE should do the same, just as it has under past administrations. We'll take more ICE questions tonight, but here's what you need to share with all of your friends. Republicans paid for all of these cruel ICE roundups by hijacking funds from healthcare and food for our families. They'd rather starve Medicaid and Medicare and slash nutrition assistance for seniors and kids just to dump tens of billions of taxpayer dollars more into ICE. Those are repulsive priorities. They are not Democratic values, and they are not the values of our district. Let me be clear, immigrants who committed crimes should be deported. And we need to hold this administration to that stated priority, which they have not followed, and they have run amok. But let's touch on healthcare, because so many of you are asking us about it, and rightly so. The Affordable Care Act is a critical lifeline. By the way, we have the most signups for Affordable Care Act policies, otherwise known as Obamacare, of any state in the country. Yet because of Republicans, millions of Americans are now losing their healthcare coverage, or they're paying sky-high prices just to keep it. When we combine the Affordable Care Act rollbacks with the Medicaid cuts in the big ugly law that Republicans passed last summer, 83,000 people in our district will lose coverage. Plus another 203,000 of our neighbors in my district face massive ACA price spikes. That is just appalling. And I've been hearing from so many people who have skyrocketing, eye popping increases in their healthcare premiums as a result of Republicans refusing to extend the enhanced premium tax credits. In Congress, every single House Democrat joined a few Republicans to pass an extension of the ACA credits. We forced this vote over the objections of Republican leaders. We did it to keep affordable coverage within reach for hundreds of thousands of friends, families, and neighbors in Florida's 25th Congressional District and millions of Americans nationwide. But Republicans in the Senate have still refused to take up that bill and pass it. We have to keep the heat on them, and I encourage you to call our Florida senators, Rick Scott and Ashley Moody, as soon as we wrap up here and share that demand. Again, Nancy Ann will dive into that a bit more momentarily, but I wanted to update you on one last thing before we take questions. The high cost of living is just out of control. Utility bills, home insurance, rent, coffee, hamburger, eggs, health insurance, our costs just keep climbing higher. I know when I go food shopping in the supermarket near me, I have to swallow hard when I get to the cash register because it's just so much more expensive to pay for the same groceries that just a couple of years ago were a lot less. There's no reason why we can't work on bringing those costs down. A year ago, remember, Trump promised, and I quote, to rapidly bring down costs. Republicans in Congress said lowering prices was their top priority. But we know now that they were not telling the truth. Republicans continue to focus on all the wrong things, attempting the takeover of Greenland, pushing anti-abortion legislation, declaring war on legal immigrants and our allies with Trump's reckless tariffs. And all it does is push up your prices and scare companies away from expanding or hiring new workers. And none of that lowers your rent or your electric bill or gets you in to see a doctor for any less money. But House Democrats are focused on making life better and more affordable for the American people. We want to expand low, clean energy options, not shut them down like Republicans are, so your utility bills can come down too. We'll block costly tariffs that drive up grocery prices and expand home construction and flooding mitigation to help hold mortgage and insurance prices in check. To tackle it home, I recently brought back millions in federal funds to our community to reinforce our flooding resiliency efforts. We also want child and elder care to be more affordable so hardworking American taxpayers can breathe easier. But none of those things that Democrats fight for show up on the Republicans' congressional agenda this year, and that needs to change this coming November. And now I'm very eager and proud to introduce a champion of quality, affordable health care, someone who I shared a foxhole with on this fight in the Obama White House. Nancy Ann DeParle is one fierce, sharp advocate for Americans and their health care. As a top assistant to the president and deputy chief of staff for policy in the Obama White House, and crucially, she served as director of the White House Office of Health Reform from 2009 to 2011. Basically, she was the Affordable Care Act czar, even though that's not what it was called back then. We would not have had an Affordable Care Act and been able to add 20 million more people to our healthcare rolls with affordable healthcare without Nancy Ann's expertise. And she's got tons of healthcare policy chops, especially on Medicare and the Affordable Care Act. And I'm so proud she's here to help me field your questions tonight. Nancy Ann, will you say a few words to my constituents joining us?
I'd be happy to, and there's no one I'd rather share a foxhole with than you, Congresswoman. No one worked harder and more tirelessly to help develop and build the Affordable Care Act into a strong bill that could cover millions and millions of Americans and bring down the cost of health care and get better quality. No one could work harder. And then you work tirelessly to defend it with, I think I've lost count, but 80 attempts to repeal it by the Republicans. You're reminding me sitting here, we spent a year working on the bill. As you know, we had, I was just looking at this, 132 congressional hearings. They had 0 hearings on this bill that they did. I think you called it the big ugly bill, and I can't disagree with you, that threw people off of Medicaid. And then finally, you may have missed this. We haven't talked about it, but about 2 weeks ago, President Trump put out his healthcare reform plan. I got out my cup of coffee and sat down with my reading glasses to really, read it. And it's one page. It's taken how many years? 10 years for him to put out one page. So I think we both have to be honest here. and I'll be honest with your constituents. I enjoyed going to Fort Lauderdale with you once with President Obama,
Yes.
and feel like I know them, and I wish I were there now instead of in the frozen tundra. This administration has no plans to make healthcare better. They only have plans to make it worse, and we're seeing that right now. When we started working on this, there were 50 million Americans uninsured, and that was a smaller population then than it is now. That was 15 years ago, and millions were losing it every day. There were no laws against pre-existing condition exclusion. So if someone got breast cancer, if someone got any sort of disease, if a child was sick, as mine was, they could be denied. Women in some states, thankfully not Florida, but some states, could be charged as much as 27 times men. Age rating was rampant. So we set out to fix all those things, and the Affordable Care Act did that. And we brought down the rate of healthcare cost growth. It was for the decade following the Affordable Care Act, it was rising at 1.7% a year, whereas it had been 4% a year for decades and decades before that. So we clearly did a lot of the right things. We got 40 million Americans covered, as you said, many in Florida, despite the fact that Florida is one of 10 states that has refused to expand Medicaid to cover the neediest people. So, we did a lot right, but as President Obama said, and as I'm sure you agree, it was a starter home. There were other things we would have liked to do. We couldn't do them. Well, guess what? I hope you're going to have an opportunity to do that soon. And unfortunately, you're going to have to it'd be nice if other people would get a broom and help us, but there's going to be a lot to clean up at that point. You're going to have a lot that you're going to have to do. But again, I was very proud to work with President Obama on this. It was an important step forward for our country, and no one worked harder than you to make sure that the law was as strong as it could be for the people that you represent.
Thank you so much, Nancy Ann. One thing I can absolutely underscore is that the Affordable Care Act was really monumental legislation that helped make sure that more than 20 million people were able to get affordable health care, but it helped everyone in the country make sure that they couldn't get kicked off their health insurance. Like I heard so many stories during the debate on the Affordable Care Act. So many people would call my office. I'm a breast cancer survivor, 18 years now. And I remember hearing constituents who would tell me that they were dropped in the middle of their treatment for disease and denied health insurance because of their pre-existing condition. And that is not possible anymore. So many more ways to be able to get access to free basic health care that's preventative, keeping people healthy, and allowing them to go to the doctor when they're sick. That's what's so disturbing about the fact that Republicans are refusing to extend these additional tax credits to ensure that we can bring down the costs of those policies. So, okay, well, I think we're ready to field some questions and look forward to hearing what you guys have on your mind.
Great. Thanks, guys. You did a really good job to sort of frame our discussion for tonight. I appreciate that. And before I jump into this first question, I just want to remind folks who are watching, please type in any questions that you might have or a comment, and we'll try to get to those as the night goes on. Just use the platform that you're watching from. So, but I'd like to kick us off with a question from Brunilda. She's in Fort Lauderdale. And she told us that she has family members who have opted not to renew their medical insurance due to cost. What can be done to help restore those people's health care through the ACA? And I'll go to you first, Nancy Ann, on this one. What's your take on that?
Well, I agree with the Congresswoman. Call your senators. She's already doing everything she can do, but call your two senators and tell them to get on board and work towards extending these enhanced premium tax credits. As I said, the Affordable Care Act was a starter home. We knew that more would have to be done over the years, and the enhanced premium tax credits were part of that. And as a result of them, I think the number of people covered in the marketplace has doubled from 12 million in 2021 to 24 million in 2024. And that was because of those enhanced credits that helped people that were right over the 62,000 for an individual. That was the limit on the tax credits when we first set it up, that helped people afford coverage. So it was a very efficient law. It needed to be made a little more generous and more affordable, and we did that. And now all they have to do is extend it, and it would be very easy to do. It doesn't even cost that much relative to how much they just spent on the tax breaks they did in their bill this year. So that's what needs to happen.
I couldn't agree with you more, Nancy Ann. And what's devastating is we spent the whole last year warning the Republicans about what was going to happen if they pushed Americans off this cliff of making sure that we could keep those folks who are in a vulnerable position, who, these are not like millionaires that get these enhanced tax
Right.
credits. These are people who are, living below middle class and who really struggle already with the lack of affordability. So since January, I mean, unfortunately, all the dire predictions have come true. It's about 1.3 million people in the country who have dropped their Affordable Care Act policies altogether. I think about 200,000 of those are in Florida alone. Again, because we have the most signups typically of any state in the country. We have the top 10 districts in the country for the most signups. And so we're disproportionately impacted by the elimination of these enhanced tax credits. And look, Brunilda, I wish I had a better answer for you, because the Republicans it's like a triple whammy. In the big ugly law last summer, they cut Medicaid. They cut SNAP, the nutrition assistance, hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts. And so now people are struggling to be able to afford nutritious food, to be able to feed their families. Folks on Medicaid who are even in a more financial difficulty, a more challenging financial situation, are going to lose their Medicaid. And then you add on top of that the folks who have eye-popping increases in their health insurance premiums that are faced with either having to drop their coverage entirely or decide, do I pay my rent or my health care insurance? I've had people already, Nancy Ann, tell me that, I had someone the other day who told me that they stopped one of their prescriptions because they needed to be able to continue to pay for their premium so they could keep the health insurance, but they had to decide not to take all the medicine that the doctors prescribed for them that actually keeps them healthy and from having more complicated health problems later on.
That's heartbreaking. And of course, this affects not just the 200,000 people in your district
In
that
Florida.
might be affected in Florida, but it affects all the people around them, because when insurance companies are looking at a population and coverage, if they see that a lot of people aren't going to be covered, then they increase the price because they assume, well, that means the people who end up spending the money are really sick. And hospitals also see that there are more uninsured, so they think, oh, we have to increase our prices because we won't have as many people, paying for our services. So it's a vicious cycle that only gets worse. And this would have been so simple to solve. As you said, the House, some of your colleagues came over knowing how much this was going to hurt people and said, yes, we need to do this. And the Senate hasn't done it. So the Senate needs to hear from your constituents and others.
Absolutely. And Brunilda, just a more direct answer to your question about what you can do. I mean, in the meantime, you can reach out to the Broward Community and Family Health Center. We have community health centers, in our community in South Florida, and you can get low cost or no cost. They do it on a sliding scale, health access to health care, and there's also preventative care that you can get access there. So if you call my office tomorrow, we can give you the contact information for the Broward Community and Family Health Center. BCOM is a fantastic facility, and we're happy to try to help you with some options to get some access to care. But it's a really tough situation.
And that cost crunch that you guys just walked through is on the mind of our next question. They're asking, could you please say a little bit about the cuts that have been made to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP as most folks call it, through the Budget Reconciliation Law, and discuss how it's not only impacting persons who need an assistance, but it's going to severely impact states that will be forced to contribute as much as $35 billion to have this program available for people in need. So can you just talk a little bit about SNAP issues?
Nancy Ann, do you want to take that at all, or?
I'll let you take that.
Okay, no problem. So what happened is that in the big ugly law, the reconciliation bill, as Dave referenced, the questioner was asking, Republicans cut hundreds of millions of dollars in SNAP, the nutrition assistance program that provides folks with affordable access to food, nutritious food. And what they did was they focused their entire set of priorities in these cuts on saying repeatedly a complete lie, and that is that SNAP benefits, nutrition assistance benefits, were going to illegal aliens. Those are words they used, to undocumented immigrants, that there was fraud in the system, and that there's a whole lot of people that needed to get kicked off of SNAP because undocumented immigrants who were accessing this benefit, and it was being deprived of people who are American citizens from getting access to that. That is a complete and utter lie. SNAP folks are not eligible for SNAP if they are not American citizens, or green card holders and are legal permanent residents. And they changed. The other thing is that they changed the eligibility for many people, with the assumption that there were folks who were just intentionally not working. They did that for Medicaid as well as for SNAP. When these are folks who get SNAP benefits and get Medicaid for their health care, who do have jobs. Medicaid and nutrition assistance are generally programs that form a bridge to help people be able to keep their heads above water and to stay afloat. They're not programs that are designed to just pay people to stay at home and be lazy and do nothing. I mean, it's preposterous, and every credible source that analyzed the Republicans' big ugly law last summer specifically documented that these are not programs that go to vast amounts of undocumented immigrants, and the people who receive those benefits already work. So essentially what they did was that they slashed hundreds of millions of dollars from these programs, billions of dollars, and actually near $1 trillion combined. And they're going to be leaving people, when all of these cuts kick in, twisting in the wind, and they will leave people hungry. They will leave people forced into going to the emergency room to get their basic access to healthcare when they are so sick that they have no other choice but to go to the emergency room, where they have to be treated, but then they can't pay because they no longer have healthcare coverage, either Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act, and that cost gets shifted to all of us, and it drives healthcare costs up for everyone. So this was a grossly irresponsible bill, one based in lies, again, because the demonization of immigrants by Republicans in this country is simply outrageous.
Nancy, I have a question for you, because this came up a lot with the questions that we received today. And I think that there is this perception that this is really just going to hammer folks who are lower income. But you alluded to just a little bit ago that this impacts everybody, and that people, even who have relatively decent, let's say, company insurance, are likely to see their costs have gone up this year. And can you just sort of explain the dynamic that we're not just talking about, sort of the most struggling working class folks that are being impacted by these cost hikes? It's just about everybody, right?
It affects everybody because that's the way insurance markets work. We're all in this together. So if you assume that people are dropping their insurance, then guess what? The people who are left have to pay more, because the actuaries, those are the mathematicians with advanced degrees who figure out how much premiums need to be to make sure there's enough money to cover the cost of people. They assume that if people are dropping, the ones who stay are going to be the ones who are really expensive. And so they have to raise the cost for those people. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, so nobody really escapes in any of all of this,
No,
unfortunately.
no,
Yeah,
we're all going to
yeah,
be affected, and
yeah.
hospitals for sure. And the congresswoman was talking about the fact that they used illegal immigrants getting a benefit as part of the reason for cutting SNAP, and they use that in Medicaid too, as you saw, which just isn't true. It doesn't cover illegal immigrants, and some states have an option to cover lawfully present people, and that's fine. But it was just absurd that they would come up with that kind of an argument to try to do this, and then now they're hurting all the hospitals.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to just give everybody a real quick reminder. If you have any questions, please go ahead and just type it into the platform that you're watching from. We'll try to get to those. And if you have a comment too, we'd be happy to share some of those. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. I got to tell you that almost half the questions that we got tonight look like they're on the ICE subject. I think that people are just watching on their social media and on TV and just horrified by what they see. I'm going to share this question from David in Pembroke Pines. He was just curious, is in your congressional district, Congresswoman, are you actually seeing any ICE activity, and how does it maybe stack up with maybe some of the activity around the country?
Yeah, thanks. I totally understand why so many questions tonight would be focused on ICE's activity and the abusive practices that they're engaged in. I'll tell you, a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago now, in Davie, just right near my house in West Davie, I live in Weston, there was ICE enforcement going on where along Weston Road, they were, and I heard they were doing this in Cooper City as well, ICE was randomly stopping lawn care trucks and pulling staff from those trucks out of their vehicles, asking for their identification, taking people away in handcuffs. This isn't enforcement related to people who are hardened criminals. This is stopping randomly people whose skin is brown, who are hardworking and who are simply trying to make a better way of life for themselves and their families. And the presumption that someone working in a lawn care business is an undocumented immigrant is outrageous and discriminatory. But that is not how ICE should be going about their business. Go after the hardened criminals. We know there are definitely criminals in the country, and we need to find them and deport them and focus ICE's resources on going after those criminals. That's what the president said he was going to do. But look, beyond just what we had reports of in the news and that we've seen, what I just described was on social media with good citizens who were filming that activity, and reports all over various neighborhood chats that specifically said that folks had seen this activity. But I mean, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has had 25,000 plus immigration arrests in our state over the last year. He jammed through a law that requires all state, county, and local police to support ICE operations. Now look, I think across our state, our law enforcement officers shouldn't be distracted by going after law-abiding individuals, to try to find undocumented immigrants, when we have real crime that they need to be paying attention to and keeping our streets safe. This is, to make matters worse, I mean, what DeSantis has done has cost Florida taxpayers on immigration, which is a federal responsibility, over $573 million. We're not supposed to be spending state tax dollars on immigration enforcement. And I mean, for instance, many of the ICE arrests in Broward have been made by Florida Highway Patrol. And I've been hearing from folks about their activity. I learned this week that FHP is scanning the plates on the highway and flagging those connected to immigrant drivers, or just straight up profiling drivers who look Hispanic, and then following them home or calling in ICE to arrest them. Not to mention the massive, inhumane ICE detention facilities in our area, including Chrome, which I did an unannounced visit to, and was able to spend about 3.5 hours in that facility. Some of you might have seen the news report after I came out of there. The conditions in Chrome were appalling. You wouldn't send someone, your worst enemy, into a ICE detention facility the way they conduct their business. And then, of course, the Everglades Detention Center, also known as Alligator Alcatraz, I've been in there as well, not with an unannounced visit, because they jumped in front of us before we were going to do that. Now, I'm encouraged by some of the court rulings that have come out recently, helping our Haitian and Venezuelan TPS holders to be able to stay in the country and stop the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem from deporting and having revoked those TPS designations, because neither of those countries are as she says they are. To suggest that Haiti and Venezuela are safe enough to send hundreds of thousands of people who have TPS here back to those countries, when we are advising Americans not to go to Haiti under any circumstances, and have a serious travel advisory absolutely saying to Americans not to go to Venezuela either. We just removed Venezuela's dictator, a move I supported, but we've got a blockade off the coast of Venezuela. There's nothing safe about going to Venezuela right now. So how are we going to send hundreds of thousands back to those countries? That they are unstable and unsafe, and that's unacceptable. But if those court cases are, if the temporary restraining orders that are stopping the administration from revoking TPS, if those get lifted and those folks have to face deportation, we're going to possibly see large-scale ICE operations in South Florida, because we are one of the largest communities in the country in terms of the population of Venezuelans and Haitians. And I am going to fight to stop this and help protect our lawful immigrants, which TPS holders are, because they came here and did it the right way, and that the ending of TPS should be done the right way as well.
Thanks, Congresswoman. And I think we're going to switch back over to the healthcare front here. I've got a question, Fredeline from Miramar, and the question is I recently got treated for cancer, and I've been getting health insurance through Obamacare. I renewed my health insurance at the beginning of the year. I just received an email that my insurance premium tripled. Ugh. It's $3,750 a month for my husband and I can't afford to pay that. What do I need to do, because I really need health insurance? Nancy Ann, do you want to jump in on this, and then Congresswoman, you take a bite at it too?
Sure.
Oh gosh. Well, first, I'm so sorry that you've been being treated for cancer, and I hope that you're better and that things are looking up for that. And you must stay insured somehow. Assuming that what happened is they automatically re-enrolled you in your same plan, which is what we try to do to keep people covered. And the Congresswoman alluded to this earlier. That's one reason why, unfortunately, we think the 1.5 million or so right now that we know have not enrolled this year, who were enrolled last year, is just the tip of the iceberg, because we think there are people like you who are just now getting these premium notices in the mail that say your premiums are going up, doubling, it sounds like tripling in your case, and you simply can't afford it. It's the size of a mortgage payment for many families. So I'm just heartbroken to hear this news for you. I will say this, the Congresswoman was talking about the governors spending $500 million on ICE enforcement, or state adjunct to ICE enforcement. Some states, not Florida, but some states have stepped up and are providing additional subsidies. California actually did this before the enhanced premium tax credits were first enacted nationally. They stepped up and gave more assistance to their citizens from their tax dollars. You pay taxes, we all do. So why can't some of it be used for that? So I'd prefer to use it for that than for additional agents running around when it's supposed to be a federal government expense. So that is what some states are doing. I think there's about a dozen or so states that have stepped in to try to provide additional subsidies. I know Maryland has done that, where I live. So that's something that you should ask for. And then, unfortunately, I think you probably need to look under at the marketplace. I don't believe Florida runs its own marketplace. I believe they rely on the federal marketplace. Is that right, Congresswoman?
Yes.
So I would go back on the website and see what other options are available. If there's something that could be less expensive, but would still give you the coverage you need to cover your cancer care and your family. Um, I'm so sorry that it's left you with that predicament. And then you just have to help the Congresswoman and her colleagues um, keep fighting and get this changed. They could change it today if they wanted to. It would be easy to change. All the state insurance commissioners have said the minute we get notice that we get the additional money, we can get out new premium notices. So it could happen really quickly. We've got to keep fighting.
Absolutely. And Federline, feel free to call my office tomorrow and we can try to connect you with an ACA navigator. There are organizations that work with families and individuals to help you shop on the marketplace to see if there are various adjustments you can make to your coverage to try to bring the cost down. I know sometimes folks will put one person on, one family member's work policy, if that's an option, or move the kids off the care, the coverage. So there's various ways of making adjustments like that. But the other real problem, Nancy Ann, is that unfortunately Florida is still, even though we are the third largest state in the country and we are the state with the most signups, we have never expanded Medicaid, which was allowable under the Affordable Care Act. It's unbelievable. So
you gave up billions of dollars that could have been
yeah.
helping people.
Yeah, we leave almost 1 million people uninsured that could be insured with subsidies. And, Federline, I'm not sure if that's something you would normally qualify for had we expanded Medicaid. But there are almost 1 million people in our state where if you lived in a different state that expanded Medicaid, you would be able to get Affordable Care Act coverage that is affordable. And so, it's just infuriating that they aren't extending the enhanced premium tax credits, that we have not expanded Medicaid here, that we are dealing with Medicaid cuts that are not just discriminatory, but completely callous and demonstrates the indifference that Republicans have for helping to make sure that people can have access to basic health care. I remember growing up all the way through my whole life, my parents always taught me, Debbie, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And having faced breast cancer, one day I was the picture of health. When I was 41 years old, just after my first mammogram, I found a lump in the shower, and the next day I was a cancer patient. And thank God, I remember thinking at the time, Nancy Ann, this was right as we were starting to debate the Affordable Care Act. And I remember this was 2008, and I remember thinking, well, oh my God, thank God I can go to the doctor and I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay for it and figure out what this is. And for me, it not only turned out to be breast cancer, but I have a genetic mutation, the BRCA mutation that made me more likely to get breast cancer, more likely to have a recurrence, more likely to get ovarian cancer. Those are all things that if I didn't have health insurance, I would never have really been able to find out. And I might not be sitting here today.
Or if we hadn't passed the law, you might not have been able to get coverage anywhere else after that, right?
Exactly.
Because it's a pre-existing condition.
Exactly. So the Senate needs to stop twiddling their damn thumbs and pass the 3-year extension of the ACA tax credits immediately. They could do it this week, and they need to stop putting people in a situation where they have to choose between health care and all their other household costs.
Well, what I've heard, I don't know if this is correct, but what I've heard is that in the Senate, the big holdup is, first, they don't really feel any urgency, which I don't get. But secondly, something about abortion, which again there is no coverage of abortion. That was an issue. Some of our colleagues wish that it could have been in there, but it isn't. It is not covered.
That's right.
So what else can we do here?
During the debate on the Affordable Care Act, that was the last holdup. When we debated that bill, the last holdup was from members on both sides of the aisle that wanted to make sure that Affordable Care Act policies did not cover abortion. There was language put in the bill that was negotiated to ensure that that was not the case. But Republicans now, for something that is completely not related to Affordable Care Act coverage, want to expressly insert abortion language for something that doesn't actually occur. It's preposterous, and it's just another.
And yet we have people like Federline who has been facing cancer and is now getting her premiums tripled. It's just
exactly
so uncaring, and I'm so sorry.
Elections have consequences, my friends, and so, I mean, just I urge folks to make sure they get out and vote in this November, because we're seeing in real time what happens when folks make decisions that result in policies that most Americans disagree with.
That's a good point. I want to switch gears one more time to back over to.
That's how town hall works.
Yeah. People can say what they want, I guess. There is another just flurry of comments and questions about ICE, and I'm going to pick one up here off of the YouTube platform. This is Just a Fly Girl. You guys all know Just a Fly Girl, right? She says that. She's saying. She's saying that citizens are being shot down in the streets. People, including citizens, are being locked up without due process. This is not normal. And I think that flows in well to what Michael asked us, and Michael's in Sunrise. His question is, given the ICE, recent activity with ICE and enforcement actions, what protections are in place to ensure the safety and rights of families and children, especially those who might be impacted, even if they are U.S. citizens?
Those are questions that we're fielding in our office and when I'm out in the community all the time now. Today, for the second time in 2 weeks, I voted against funding for ICE and for the Department of Homeland Security. And House Democrats, my colleagues and I, have used every lever we have to force Republicans to enact common sense reforms. No masks on ICE agents so we can see who they are. Cameras on so that you can see and have documentation of an enforcement action. No dragnet operations, no busting into houses with no warrants, no dragging people out of their cars. They're doing that to American citizens. No racial profiling. Look, let me just say right here, I am not for defunding ICE. I'm not for abolishing ICE. Some people might want me to take that position. ICE actually has some other responsibilities, including doing forensic investigations to go after child sexual predators and folks who engage in, trafficking in child pornography, which are crime scene photos, not pornography. But there have to be guardrails and accountability. ICE is out of control. They have more money than they know what to do with. And they are just absolutely unchecked, and that's unacceptable. Since the killings of U.S. citizens in Minnesota, we have some Republicans in Congress who have reached their limit as well, and here's why. Republican voters don't like what they're seeing either. No one wants masked agents shooting first and asking questions later. Everyone wants secure borders, but violence against Americans and legal immigrants who are already here does nothing about that. I'm going to keep leading this fight for a humane immigration system. We have to conduct rigorous oversight. We have to push for accountability. I'm going to use my role on the Appropriations Committee to put real constraints on ICE and CBP's funding. We're going to shut down city invasions, focus on criminals. That is absolutely essential. I'm for focusing on criminal immigrants who need to be found and kicked out of the country. We're going to fight in the courts to protect U.S. citizens and lawful immigrants' rights. We're going to promote a better vision for our immigration system. By the way, we need comprehensive immigration reform. That is something that Democrats and Republicans can come together and really make a difference on. I want to see the president step up to the plate. He could use his leverage with my colleagues and really leave a lasting legacy. But he just, he's focused on the wrong priorities. We need to let our local law enforcement put real criminals away and stop distracting them and stopping lawn trucks and stopping folks on the highway, hunting down, immigrants they decide don't belong here, even if they haven't committed a crime. And we need to let law-abiding, hardworking immigrants earn permanent status. That is what we need to be doing, and that's what I'm going to continue to fight for.
Thanks, Congresswoman. I've got a question that came in here off of one of the platforms. This is about a small business issue. As a small business, one of the few sources to get funding is SBA. But for the last 6 months, it is virtually impossible to resolve any issue with them. Is there any way our representative can help?
Yes, if you're having a problem with any federal agency, whether it's the Small Business Administration or VA or Social Security, DOD, DHS, you can call my district office. I have dedicated full-time staffers who can help you navigate any problem you have with federal agency. We've gotten millions of dollars back for folks over the years. So my district office number is 954-845-1179. You can go on my website if you don't have a pen, and that's wassermanschultz.house.gov. Any casework help, you can reach out to us, but just call the office and we're happy to help you. I have heard about the programs that the SBA has suspended and terminated unlawfully, and we're fighting against those because, look, what's happening here is you have an administration that is ignoring the funding that is law that Congress has appropriated and that have been signed into law by either this president or the previous president. And we've beat most of those cuts back, but the backlog concern here with the SBA losing a lot of staff because of the Trump layoffs and firings and hiring freezes. So my team can definitely help you sort of navigate all of that. And so just feel free to give us a call.
Great, thanks, Congresswoman. I'm going to shift back over to sort of healthcare. We've got a question coming in from Lynn. She's in Plantation. She just wants to know generally what is happening with Social Security and Medicare. And I know you both know a lot about these subjects. Nancy Ann, do you want to start us off? Is there anything that you can give us updates on either Social Security or Medicare?
Well, not Social Security. I suspect the Congresswoman would have an update there.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to Medicare, there are some concerning things happening just this past week, where the administration put out a rulemaking about Medicare Advantage, basically talking about the rate increases for next year, and it is basically not an increase, which will lead the plans, unfortunately, the Medicare Advantage plans, if you happen to be in a Medicare Advantage plan, which many people in Florida are, because there are a lot of offerings down there. If it goes into effect in April, it will have the effect of cutting back on benefits. It might have some plans decide to leave the market. And again, it could cause premiums to be raised in Medicare. I'm hoping it won't happen. That there's a comment period where people like you can let the administration know, Dr. Oz and the people at CMS know what you think of it. But I think on top of everything else they've done, which we've been talking about, I was honestly shocked that they would put this out because there's no question that healthcare costs have been increasing, and they've been increasing for hospitals too. The cost of labor have gone up. And so to signal to the plans, well, we're going to actually reduce what you're getting. And it's being done under the guise of fraud and abuse. But when you actually look at it, there's some coding changes that they want to make, that they think that coding is unfair. But this isn't the year to do it. You exercise some discretion in these things. And this is an area where they have discretion to say, we'll phase this in. We want to make some changes, we'll phase it in. But instead, they announced basically a 0% increase, which, again, this is just not the time to be doing that. I don't want to scare anyone because we don't know anything yet, but it bears watching. Again, as a citizen, I'm so proud of all of you for being on this being in this town hall and showing up to learn more about what's going on. And so I feel like I need to tell you that happened just in the last week, and it's very concerning for those of you who are or your loved ones who have chosen to be in a Medicare plan. Congresswoman, you may want to address Social Security.
Yeah, and I also want to just sort of add on to what you just said, because you mentioned comment period. So the comment period of these proposals, usually these are proposed rule changes, and those comment periods are the opportunity for folks in this country, for citizens, to reach out to an agency and put a comment in about your opposition to or support for a particular proposal. In October, for example, after President Trump actually was proposing the largest Social Security disability cut in history, I led 165 Democrats in Congress to fight back against that, and I put a spotlight on President Trump's scheme to propose to cut back on Social Security disability and who could access it. And there were thousands of comments. There was a lot of attention from the press. He was really exposed because he had said right from the very beginning of his campaign that he would never touch it, Medicare or Social Security, that he wasn't going to, and no cut.
He said Medicaid too, by the way.
He
Remember,
did,
but whatever.
exactly, yes, yep.
Okay.
He said Medicaid
Right.
too, lied about that also. So when you have sunlight on a proposal like this, and that's what these comment periods are for, it tends to get the administration to sit up and take notice. And so Trump ended up caving on that Social Security disability cut. They pulled the proposal back, and they abandoned the cuts because they got caught red-handed. And I'm proud to have been a large part of very publicly pushing back against that proposal. But he cut over $500 billion from Medicare, my friends. There is something called a sequester. It's a complicated term, but because the cuts because the impact on the deficit in the big ugly law was so
To raise it.
that it triggered in the Budget Control Act that was passed a long time ago a $500 billion cut to Medicare. And that threatens the long-term sustainability of the Medicare program, which we're already trying to make sure has the solvency to be able to pay out the benefits, more so than the revenue coming in from the Medicare taxes that folks pay. So it's just unbelievable. Trump, though, they signaled to us what their plan was in Project 2025. Trump and his Project 2025 cronies, they want to privatize Social Security. You've got his Treasury Secretary that basically said that there was a proposal they had that was a backdoor way of beginning the privatization of Social Security. They fired Social Security staff and stripped the agency for parts. They are in the process.
And IRS, yeah.
The IRS, they're in the process of closing field offices. That means longer wait times. People have to drive further distances. We're talking about seniors who need to get access to these benefits. So we have to stand guard, and I always will stand guard to fight to protect Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And again, we've got an election in November. We need people to get out and vote. Make sure you register. And by the way, also make sure your vote by mail sign up expires in Florida every election cycle now. You always have to go back on your Supervisor of Elections website and sign back up to vote by mail.
That makes no sense. But
No.
but by the way, I was holding up my phone because I know there's a way to file a comment to CMS just by using your phone and going
really?
to a link. I think so. So I bet your office can tell people how to do that. So it's
good.
not, I don't want people to think you have to write a big formal letter. You can actually go through, there's a place on the CMS website where you can send a comment in. And so people who are doing these questions tonight, it's almost like that process where you can just send in a comment saying, please don't cut my Medicare.
Perfect. I'll do a
It's
social
as simple as that.
and
Yeah.
put that on my website on how to do that permanently. That's great.
Super,
Thank you.
good advice.
Awesome.
Congresswoman, I've got a quick question here for ICE, and then we want
Yeah.
to jump to one more Medicare before we close up. So if this next question has got a quick, easy answer, let's take a
Okay,
whack
sure.
at it. But this is from Anne Marie in Fort Lauderdale. She wants to know, what should you do if you see someone being approached by ICE in a harsh way?
Okay. Okay. So if you're a U.S. citizen and you encounter ICE, the most important thing is to show proof of citizenship. I mean, if you're a citizen, and unfortunately right now there's a lot of people who feel like they need to carry their passports with them. I wish I could tell you that that's not necessary, but right now it really is. After you say, I'm a citizen, don't say another word. Don't lie. Don't volunteer any information at all. You are not required to volunteer any information at all. If ICE knocks on your door, you ask for a warrant signed by a judge. It cannot come in your house if they don't have one. If they show you a fake administrative warrant that ICE produces without a judge, do not let them in. You do not have to, and if they don't show you a warrant with a judge, signed by a judge, don't let them in. No matter your status, you're entitled to all the same rights when dealing with ICE as you are when you deal with the local police. You can't have an unreasonable search and seizure. You have to have due process. You have to have a judicial review. You also have the right to an attorney, and you have the right to film ICE and CBP officers. I have posted on all my social media complete guidance for folks to handle ICE encounters. It's on my website, it's on my Instagram, I think it might be on my Facebook too, and it's available in several languages, including Spanish and Haitian Creole. So you can always call my district office, 954-845-1179. WassermanSchultz.house.gov is my website if you need help with a specific immigration issue. If you see ICE and you're not the target, stay at a safe distance. That's extremely important. Record on your phone if you can. And if they're detaining someone, yell, "What's your name?" so that they can be identified by advocates. I believe in Florida they have passed a 25-foot buffer zone around ICE. So they will probably be trying to deter people who want to get closer than that. But you can certainly take out your phone and film. You're entitled to film. It's still a free country, and that's still your First Amendment right of free expression.
Great, that's very helpful. I've got two questions here, and then I want us to sort of wrap up. We're actually bumping into time, but I think we can go over a little bit, and apologies in advance, Nancy Ann. This one might be good for you, Nancy Ann. There is a question from Ralph in Hollywood who wants to know what's planned for Medicare to address long-term care needs. Do you want to maybe tell us what you might know about that?
Well, unfortunately, I wish I had good news for you here. I mean, I think the most important thing is that right now the president has said he won't touch Medicare. And the Congresswoman told us he tried to, and she fought, and with all of you fought back. And so she's kept him from doing that so far. But what they did do recently was roll back a law a regulation that had been put forward by the Biden administration that had been finalized to require better staffing of nursing homes. So you're talking about long-term care. I'm talking about the institutional part of it. There's also a form of long-term care that involves, getting care at home. And so far, that should be fine. There are no attempts that I'm aware of to go after care at home or any of those kinds of provisions that are there. But there's nothing to expand it either. So there are a lot of people who need home health and under Medicare, unless you're in a Medicare Advantage plan where there are more generous rules. And in traditional Medicare, it doesn't cover home health unless it's after a hospitalization or after a nursing home. So if you just need chore services or some help with your daily activities of living to stay in your home, unless your state has a waiver program, which Florida does, but it's capped, there isn't much for you, I'm afraid. So I think what we have to focus on right now is keeping what we have. And as I said, in a heartbreaking move and cynical move, the Trump administration decimated a rulemaking that had been done by the Biden administration and gone through the courts and everything and been upheld, but the nursing home industry fought it, and it would have required better staffing of nursing homes, which would have saved lives. And there's unfortunately a very painful story to read in the New York Times about campaign contributions that occurred, and then the regulation got canned because of that. So this is an area, I'm glad you raised it, because it's something that we haven't done enough on, is making sure that people have access to long-term care, to stay in their homes as long as they can. And if they need to be in a nursing home because they can't take care of themselves anymore, their family isn't there, we need to make sure it's safe. And those are things that I think the Congresswoman and her colleagues will work on once they're back in the majority. I know they will.
For sure. I mean, Nancy, and you remember there was a provision in the Affordable Care Act originally that provided for a long-term care program. It actually had to be repealed because it was determined to be actuarially unsound, and it wasn't something that was actually going to be able to provide the kind of benefits, from what I remember.
Yes, that's right. The Class Act. Yes.
Right. Exactly. So we've already demonstrated as Democrats that we're committed to trying to find an affordable way to make sure that long-term care is accessible. It is something that is such a huge issue, with an aging population and the sandwich generation. I'm living in the sandwich generation right now. My father is aging, and he's doing great right now, but I worry about what's going to happen when he really can't or shouldn't live alone any longer. And we don't want our seniors to be living longer than they have to without the additional care that they need. And what happens is that far too often people have to leave the workforce to take care of a loved one, or they have to spend crazy amounts of money to get the care they need. That's why Medicare was enacted in 1965, because you had the children of elderly people who were having to come out of pocket and be able to, or stop working to take care of their parents because they didn't have health care. And so that's what Medicare was originally enacted for, and it's been the lifeline for generations. But Medicare still doesn't cover long-term care services, and it puts another added stress on families who are already struggling. Look, what's important to note, this is the intersection of the immigration crisis that the administration has created, because the biggest threat to affordable long-term care are Trump's attack on immigrant workers, because Haitian TPS holders alone are nearly 1 in 10 of our home care workers in the US. 1 in 10. More than 100,000 home care providers in Florida have TPS, and they would have lost their ability to work today had a judge not stopped Trump's illegal de-documentation. Imagine trying to staff a senior home or a care facility when a quarter of the workforce disappears because they lose their work authorization as soon as they lose their TPS.
Yes.
I mean,
that's happening in California too. I was talking to a doctor friend out there, and he said, I'm having trouble maintaining my senior patients because their home care workers are afraid to come to work because of ICE.
And then what'll happen if they lose their TPS permanently and face deportation, as soon as they lose their TPS, they are no longer legal to work. And I mean, it's just, to make matters worse, Republicans have cut over $1 trillion from Medicaid. That's an actual documented amount of money, and that's the largest payer of long-term care services in the United States. Folks who are only able to be in a nursing home because of their Medicaid coverage. And so we'll have nursing home closures, more seniors with nowhere else to turn. We'll end up with more homeless seniors because that happens. And it's going to lead to more emergency room visits and higher costs for really the whole healthcare system. And we're going to just continue to fight back. And you
thank goodness there's an election.
Exactly.
That's all. I'm just sitting here thinking, thank goodness we have an election coming up soon, because.
For sure.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to Claudia and Cynthia. Claudia sent up a question about affordable housing and what kind of options are going to exist there, and just housing in general. We saw so many comments come in tonight and throughout the day from people who are worried about this affordability crunch and especially keeping that roof over their head. We also have a question related to that from Cynthia in Plantation, and she says that she's really worried about the rising price of homeowners insurance, and it all wraps into that, keeping a roof over your head. So Debbie, maybe could you comment on that, and then I think that we're going to close with that question and then let
Sure.
both of you give us some takeaways. So why don't you try to tackle the housing?
Okay. So, I mean, I'm really concerned too. Cynthia, homeowners insurance prices are out of control. The state, under DeSantis, really hasn't done a whole lot about it. We're not seeing really significant reductions in those costs from the bills they've passed because they're, in bed with the property insurance companies, and, they are caring more about their donors than they do about the folks who need to be able to have affordable place to live. I mean, we have, in Florida, I mean, people save up for years to buy a home. And then when they finally have the money to do that, they find out that their homeowner's insurance premium costs sometimes are the same as their monthly mortgage payment. And that is appalling. So last year, we led the nation in our state in homeowner insurance non-renewal rates, because insurers are either jacking up prices, which leads to drop coverage, or they're pulling out of the state entirely. So I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of the Insure Act. That is legislation that would create a federal catastrophic reinsurance program that would help stabilize the insurance market in Florida. We did that in 1992, back when I was in the State House after Hurricane Andrew. We passed a catastrophic reinsurance program, and we've struggled with the ability to be able to keep that has remained solvent, but we have the insurance of citizens, which is our insurance of last resort, which has a lot of problems right in that entity as well. But the bottom line is that no Floridian should go broke trying to protect their home from natural disasters. You have Trump's tariffs that are increasing the cost of building housing, builders passing along price hikes to home buyers. I remember my husband and I were able to buy our first house right before we got married. I was 24 and he was 26, Nancy Ann. And I mean, I have kids all in their 20s. They are nowhere near, and they all have full-time jobs. Graduated from college. One of my children has a master's degree, and they're a decade from being able to buy their first house, I would imagine. And like the fact that we've pushed home ownership at least a decade forward from when
We were, yeah,
I was going to say I know we're a similar age.
right.
From when we were able to begin to buy our home is outrageous. And then for Trump to propose 50% mortgages, I mean that's insanity. People will be in debt for their entire lives and they'll have no equity in their home. This is like
He's focused on all the wrong things.
yeah, well, he's focused on the wealthiest, most fortunate Americans, which is why in the big ugly law they made the tax cuts that they jammed through unpaid for in 2017 in his first term, they made those permanent. Of course, at the same time, they could have also made permanent or at least extended the enhanced premium tax credits in the same bill, which we pushed them to do and they refused. So we need to make sure that we have bipartisan cooperation, folks coming together to help make life more affordable for all Americans. That is critical. People having to struggle to make ends meet just to be able to deal with their basic kitchen table costs, that has to be our top priority. That's what I hear about the most when I am home with my constituents. And so look forward to seeing everybody when I come back home. Feel free to stop me in the supermarket or in Costco or wherever you see me. That's often where I am when I'm at home over the weekends getting my errands done. But also looking forward to seeing people all over the community. I know people are deeply concerned about ICE, about CBP, about immigration enforcement. Folks are being profiled, and that's outrageous. Know that I'm going to fight to make sure that we can put accountability and guardrails over this next 2-week period, where that's the next period where the Department of Homeland Security bill runs out. And we're going to push to try to ensure that there's some guardrails. We're getting pushback from the Speaker and from the House Republican leadership. They don't seem interested in trying to make sure that there's some safeguards and accountability to ensure that people's rights aren't abused. But we're going to push. And I'm very fortunate to be able to represent our community up here in our nation's capital. And Nancy Ann, you want to close us out?
I would just say I'm so energized to see you and your constituents and the people that you represent all focused and fired up and continuing to fight. And that gives me heart that things are going to get better. So thank you for everything you're doing to lead here.
Thank you as well. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. I'll be doing town halls like this all through the year. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nancy Ann.
Bye.